By winning the Mexican Grand Prix, has Lando Norris shown us he's got the momentum that's going to take him to the Formula One world title this year? Is Ollie Behrman a future world champion after finishing fourth for Haas? And was Lewis Hamilton right to get a 10-second penalty that left him finishing down in 8th? This is On Track, talkSPORT's weekly motorsports show every Tuesday afternoon from 2 p.m. on talkSPORT 2, on the talkSPORT Podcast Network, whenever you want to listen, and on the talkSPORT Driving YouTube channel. I am John Jackson, and I'm joined by former British F3 race winner Piers, now turned commentator for the FIA F3 series. And the elephant in the room is that, yes, I'm in my mum's car. I'm actually about to drive to the airport to go to Formula E testing, which is in Valencia this week. So we'll bring you next week's show from that. Piers, well, let's start by talking about the Mexican Grand Prix. It was a fascinating race, 4 wide into the first corner, loads to talk about from it. But the main story is that Lando Norris absolutely dominated that weekend, even from qualifying. I mean, he was 10ths ahead of the next driver, Charles Leclerc.
Yeah, it's just one of those weekends. As a driver, you always get them. Well, I say always. Some drivers never get them. But as a top driver, sometimes you get them where everything just... It feels like you can't do any wrong. You just turn up at the track. The car feels good. You feel good. You do your first session. You look at the lap times and you're up on everyone. And it just continued on from there. And Norris has really sort of changed up a gear in his form recently, which is the perfect part of the season to do it, and puts himself in a pretty tasty situation in the championship with only a few races to go now.
Absolutely. We're going to get on to what Oscar Piastri said after the race, but obviously you probably watched the race now, or you might have listened to it, and it was, I mean, drama throughout. There was a kind of lull in the middle, and then there was drama towards the end as well. But I know from what you've said to me over the few years that I've known you, Piers, that 3 wide into a corner is always a little bit hairy, but 4 wide, I mean, something's got to give there. And it was Max Verstappen that gave and did a bit of rally driving. He actually sort of said in the cool-down room, a bit of rally driving, which was, I mean, it's a long run down into that first corner. I'm lucky enough to have been to that track, and I don't think going 4 wide in that corner is one of the ones you want to go 4 wide in, if any corner.
Well, I enjoyed all the stats that were ahead of the race. You know, the Max Verstappen's, is it led like 4 out of 5 or 5 out of the 6 last times, and he's always gained positions, something like that. There's only one race he hasn't led into the first corner. Obviously, he was starting further back than he has done in all the previous times where he did lead. But we knew he was going to go for it. It's Max Verstappen. He loves it. He's so good at the starts. He's so good at making an opportunity, taking any opportunity that comes. And he rolled the dice and went around the outside, but in typical Max fashion, I think it was a roll of the dice, but he knew he had the bailout of the big old flat grass on the outside. I don't think he calculated quite how fast he would enter that grass, because I saw him go off when I was watching the live broadcast, and I was like, there's no way there was no way he's coming out there. He's in the wall, because the grass has no grip, and he just about kept it out of the wall. If you've seen the onboard, yeah, he was very much trying to keep control of that car, not just trying to take positions. But then just, came back on the track and then let everyone through. And I know there's been a fair amount of chat, especially from one George Russell, about all of the grass cutting at the first corner, but I think we'll probably talk about that at some point.
Yeah, we'll get onto that later. It's more that, for me, that 4 wide into the first corner, Lando Norris did lose the lead briefly, but then obviously he gained it back because I think Charles went past him or Lewis went past him. I can't remember which of the Ferraris went past him in an illegal manner and gave him that position back. The reason I want to highlight this so much is because that's the only thing that really happened with Lando Norris in the race. It's one of those where you're so dominant that once he got a bit of a gap and was down the road, obviously he then ended up winning by 30.1 seconds. And it would have been longer, a bigger gap, had obviously that virtual safety car at the end not happened. And I think it's disappointing, actually, when you're having a really successful weekend, you actually get a lot less time on the actual live race broadcast. Sure, you get all the interviews afterwards, and you get the post-qualifying interview there with whoever and whatever, but during the race you actually didn't see Lando at all because there were other battles going on. So a little bit tricky for him, but given that Lando has suddenly found something in this car and Oscar hasn't, it's made this title battle really fascinating, because now Lando leads by 1 point with 4 races to go. I think Oscar did pretty well to get to 5th from where he was in 7th, because it's not particularly easy to overtake there.
Yeah, and also Oscar fell backwards at the start, didn't he, as well? Potentially a little bit conservative, knowing that he's right in the middle of the pack, couldn't afford to have any crashes. But, view going into this weekend was I'd rather be Oscar Piastri with a bit of a buffer. But now, going into the next, the final 4 races, isn't it? 4 more to go. I would much rather be Lando Norris with now basically level on points, but in a rich run of form at the moment, because, you've got the momentum, you've got the confidence, and as much as it doesn't always translate in Formula One, there's no, you can't, past success is no guarantee of future performance. But, he's going to be going into the next round going, if I just execute like I have done recently, then that's I'm going to be absolutely fine. Whereas Piastri is going to be leaving this weekend thinking, I need to find something. Something needs to change. I need to do better. And oftentimes in motorsport, because there's so many variables, both with car, team, driver, the way you drive the car, the circuit, the setup, the aerodynamic package, it's hard to put a finger on exactly what it is. Oscar will be hoping that, well, I'm hoping, if you're an Oscar fan, that he will be like, that was what went wrong this weekend. But it's not always that simple. And if he hasn't got the finger on that's exactly what went wrong, then yeah, he's got in for a stressful few races.
Did you see his post-race interview on Sky Sports here in the UK?
I didn't actually know.
He was kind of suggesting, and it felt like he was trying to bite his tongue and not say something. And he was saying that nothing's changed with the car, but the way he's had to drive the car has changed. And maybe Lando has become more, has quickly adapted to how he's having to drive the car, whereas for Oscar he's struggling more and he's going to have to work on it and add some tools to the toolkit, I think was what he said. And I don't know what he really meant by that, because it's almost like he was, I don't know, he felt like he was biting his tongue. So I'm sure maybe we'll sort of read into that more and you can go and check out that video yourselves. But yeah, it felt like there's something that, it feels like he knew something. He knew what was going on, but couldn't vocalize it. I don't know whether there was an issue with his car or something's not quite working out, but it was a very confusing interview. And it was, I guess, him in a moment of frustration, trying to be very diplomatic about it, whilst also praising Lando, to be fair to him, by saying that Lando had obviously got to grips with it really well. It seems strange that a driver that's dominated, as he said in that interview, for 19 races, or at least been incredibly competitive for 19 races, can suddenly have this drop-off, because he didn't look like he was comfortable in the car all weekend, from qualifying, practice sessions, right the way through to the race. Is there anything that you spotted about Oscar that would suggest, maybe he's feeling the pressure?
I mean, to be honest, watching him throughout the whole weekend, he was struggling from the first session, wasn't he? Lando Norris had the upper hand on him by, at some points, getting on for a second. So there's clearly something fairly fundamental based on what he said there. It sounds pretty cryptic, but as a driver, if you're having to change the way you drive the car, that says to me that they've changed either they've changed with an upgrade that's changed the way the car drives, or they've changed the philosophy, maybe the way that the car sits, maybe the suspension setup, maybe the aero balance quite considerably, such that you can't drive the car in the same way. And you do, when you're racing a car throughout a season, you do get into a groove. If I know how I need to apply the brakes, remove the brakes, apply the steering, are you U-ing the corners? Are you V-ing the corners? This is, do you carry a lot of speed to the middle, or do you brake late and go into the corner hard and then shoot it out in a straight line? And if you've got into a groove and then the setup changes such that you need to change that, and the way that the car responds to the way that you drive it, and also the overall balance, is it oversteer, is it understeer, is it that sort of thing. It can, if it does change and you don't get to grips with it, or it doesn't suit your driving style, can throw you off a little bit. And clearly some form of change has happened this weekend, which has meant that he's struggled somewhat. So interesting. And I wonder if that's just for the Mexico weekend, or I wonder if that's going to be a factor going forward. Mexico's a fairly unique circuit, being so high altitude wise. We don't have many circuits in Formula One like that. It's also its layout, a lot of medium speed corners as well. Maybe they chose to go one way with a setup that didn't suit Oscar's driving preferences. It was really interesting, and it will be very, very important to see him go well in the first part of first practice at the next event, because if he's struggling in practice 1 and practice 2, or is it the sprint race or practice 1 at the next event, then that would say to me that maybe there's been a whole philosophy change on the way they're setting up that McLaren, and it could then hand everything, or all the momentum, back to Norris even further.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens now that the momentum has shifted. And I think as fans, we're going to be treated to a fascinating end to the season, because, you've had Oscar leading by quite a while, then you've had now Lando leading by 1 point again. And then you always have that threat of Max Verstappen in the background, and you can never count out the 4-time world champion Max Verstappen, though, can you? Because he qualified 5th, he dropped back, he then carved his way through the field, and he almost came second. I feel like if we'd had another racing lap, which we should have done if it wasn't for that virtual safety car, I feel like Max Verstappen would have come second, and that would have made potentially a huge difference. Imagine we come to the end of the season and Max misses out on the title after shenanigans with the McLarens, and he only misses out by a couple of points. That's where the couple of points could have come from.
Yeah, I mean, there was no guarantee he was going to get through, but it did look pretty likely with 2 laps to go. He nearly had to go down towards turn 1 with a couple of laps to go on Charles Leclerc, whose tyres were just dropping off a cliff, and Max was coming strong at the end. But then that virtual safety car with Carlos Sainz, who spun in the final sector, it was so close to being out of the way, but unfortunately, safety first. Clearly, the race direction team were a little bit more risk averse after what happened earlier in the race, which we'll get onto. But they unfortunately just robbed us of a battle down towards turn 1. But you say that if he loses out by 2 or 3 points, then that could be the difference. But who knows? He could have crashed with Charles Leclerc down towards turn 1. So it's one of those things that we will never know. Max was very much he was pretty bold this race, wasn't he? As he always is. But it was a shame. It would have been nice to see him fight for that second place. And another excellent weekend for Max and Red Bull, to be fair. They stuck to that one-stop strategy, which a lot of the drivers inside the top 10 abandoned. I'm not convinced that it actually worked for many of the teams, because Max wasn't looking like an odds-on favourite for a podium, even after the first pit stops, was he? And then there he was at the end of the race fighting for second.
And I think it was actually a fascinating end to the race, because it did that kind of thing where an F1 race has chaos at the start and then it settles down. But then there was a bit more drama towards the end, because you had Oscar Piastri chasing down 4th place with fresher tyres, and then you had Max Verstappen chasing down Charles Leclerc for 2nd place. But then, of course, you had Ollie Behrman at one point towards the end of the race, maybe not so near the end of the race, where Haas decided to give up the 3rd place to go put soft tyres on and hopefully cement 4th place, because it looked like Max Verstappen was going to very quickly catch him. And then that was drama as well. And Ollie Behrman, his best result in Formula One. It's weird because if you've seen social media, it's being celebrated like he won the race. You've got videos of him with his partner. You've got his dad who's always there. You've got him celebrating with the team. And I mean, who was it? It was Romain Grosjean was sharing a photo that he's obviously taken at a previous race with Ollie Behrman and shouting him out. And does that show you just what an achievement this is for Ollie and for Haas, which is obviously their joint best result ever, that they've managed to come forth given where they probably should, in theory, in the pecking order of Formula One finish?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this wasn't even a race that had mitigating circumstances. There was no rain. There was no changeable conditions. There wasn't even a full safety car. It's like he got 4th place on merit. Like, he raced from, was it 9th to 6th at the start of the race, and then picked his way through and put himself in what was looking like a podium position. And, Max was going to be too strong, I think, for him. So I think the podium eventually would have been off the cards. But 4th place, 12 points, really, really valuable for the Haas team. But clearly those upgrades that they've been putting out recently have been working, because they were pretty strong last time out as well in Austin, and then they've just got to grips with that I think it's a new floor, isn't it, they've put on, which is the main upgrade. And then Ollie, I mean, I've been so impressed with Ollie the second half of this year. He's been talked up by a lot of people who have worked with him. I've spoken to, in fact, we spoke to someone in Bergamo Airport literally a couple of weeks ago who was a race engineer for Ollie on one of his first ever days in a racing car. And they said that he jumped in the racing car on a wet day, and by the end of the day, he's like, I can't teach you anymore. And that was his first day in the wet in a racing car. And that was, 4, 5, 6 years ago, or maybe not even that long, probably 3 or 4 years ago, because he's still so young. Clearly got the talent. He's been, I would say, outperforming on pace at the very least, Esteban Ocon, who's an established driver. And that second Ferrari seat was eventually going to be empty, isn't it, with Lewis Hamilton in the twilight of his career. And if he keeps banging in results like this and performances like this, is a shoo-in.
And the big question is, will he put it on Charles Leclerc if he is his teammate? I mean, he's going to, in theory, have... Well, I don't want to say that Lewis Hamilton hasn't been as competitive, because we've seen this weekend that Lewis, without that 10-second time penalty, was very competitive. But for Charles Leclerc, he's going to have a young pretender ready to sort of take his crown as the main guy at Ferrari. So that's going to be fascinating to see. We didn't get that guy's name, I don't think, that we met at the airport, but he was suggesting that Ollie's one of those drivers that just gets in a car and you can just tell straight away that you've got it. You haven't got to teach him anything at all. He understands the physics of the car. He understands how to drive the car. He understands how to get the most out of the car. And that must be a dream for a race engineer to have that, especially working at junior level. On the show yesterday on talkSPORT, Alan Pardew, who former manager of Newcastle United and other teams, he's a football guy, but he's massively into his Formula One. He made a very bold claim, Piers, and I'd love to know what you make of this. He proclaimed that Ollie Behrman will be a future world champion. He then doubled down on that and said, in the next 4 years. I mean, is that possible if that Ferrari move comes off?
Possible, yes. I think it's bold. I mean, Alan Pardew knows more about football than I will ever know. Hey, only time will tell. I don't think it's likely, but there's a chance, isn't there? Because he is performing at a very high level. He'll be joining, we assume he'll be joining Ferrari in a year or so's time, having had a few years of experience in Formula One with Haas. We've seen it work with George Russell, and all it takes is Ferrari to have a good car and a good year, and then in theory, if they've got the dominant car, all he has to do, I say, is if it's easy, is to beat Charles Leclerc, which is no mean feat. But Ollie's hungry. He's at the start of his career. Charles has had a lot of experience at Ferrari. He had opportunities to win races, but never really a championship hunt properly. So possible, but I wouldn't say it's likely. But to add to our point, we spoke to the race engineer from Elite Motorsport, I think it was, after the GB3 finale in Monza. I've actually spoke to people who work with Ollie in karting, and they said the same thing. I've had one guy that used to run a kart racing team, big kart racing team in the UK, one of the most successful ones. I said to him once, just as a conversation, I was with him on a race weekend, I was like, who's the most talented driver you've worked with? Because he's worked with drivers back from, through the 70s, 80s, or maybe not 70s, but 80s, 90s, 2000s. He said Ollie Behrman is probably the most talented driver he's ever seen as well. So clearly there's something that Ollie's got. And also he was thrust into Formula One pretty quickly alongside Kimi Antonelli, when neither of them had the best season in F2. So clearly, even though their results in F2 weren't quite there, they were showing enough, both of them, that they deserved an early promotion. And actually, so far, Ollie Behrman's looked potentially the more comfortable in Formula One. We've seen Antonelli, we've spoken about it, been quick at times, but has had off weekends here and there. I think Behrman's still beating Ocon in the qualifying head-to-head, isn't he?
Yeah, he's qualifying incredibly well against his teammates. So I think maybe Alan Pardew knows what he's talking about. And also this chap from Elite Motorsport, who hopefully is listening and will let us know his name, has obviously shown Ollie Behrman something. Let's give him some credit. It's worth pointing out, actually, this guy said he'd worked with 3 British racing drivers or 3 Formula One drivers. And that was Ollie Behrman, George Russell and Oscar Piastri. So he's a pretty well-esteemed man. He's obviously very good at what he does. So shout out to him. Just going back to Max, how can he win this championship? What needs to happen? Because he's 36 points behind Lando Norris. So in theory, he's cut the gap between him and the championship by 4 points. But it doesn't take a mathematician to work out that 4 points per race over the next 4 races isn't going to get him another world championship. It kind of does rely on both McLarens having a couple of DNFs, or at least one DNF, to cut that gap, while he needs to win every race. I mean, I did the calculations, and if Max wins every race, he would need Lando, for example, not to come second in more than 2 races, which is a bit of a stretch given how well Lando's been driving.
Well, yes, it is a stretch, but I think it was about 4 or 5 races ago, and there was about 7 or 8 races to go. We worked out that if Max beat Lando and Oscar in every single race going forward, and they were second and third, that Max would beat. But Formula One is not that simple, and it's so close at the moment, because at that point McLaren were clearly the fastest team, so we were thinking, they're going to be first or second or maybe third in every race going forward. But it's so close out there. We've had a Ferrari come second, Charles Leclerc's in the second, and Max Verstappen only just came up to third. Piastri was started in. It's actually so close, it's hard to call. But I think we've had an indication already of Max's outlook into the final chapter of this championship with the start of the race. He's not going in, taken the high percentage marks. He thinks, if I'm going to win this championship, I need to go out there and take it by the scruff of the neck and basically go full send. Taking it 4 wide around the outside of the first corner, that's not a high percentage move by Max. And it could quite easily have seen him go into the barrier. Max works very well when he's, completely full send basically and taking high risk maneuvers, overtaking aggressively. We saw it with Hamilton as well. He's not giving anything. He's absolutely full push. And that's the way that Max Verstappen is most dangerous in terms of the championship. But also, we've seen Max can have a crash and pushes the rules to the limits. So I expect more of the same from Max, which is scary for the drivers around him, but also great for us as entertainment at home, because we know that every weekend he's going to go out there. I think he's just going to concentrate on himself. He's going to try and go out there and win the remaining races, because then if he does that, he's done all he can do, and then whatever will be, will be. He's come from a position much further back in the championship. He knows it's a statistical unlikelihood, so therefore all he can do is just absolutely go for it. And also he's pretty safe, isn't he, in the championship in terms of behind him. I mean, the George Russell in 4th is a good 70 or 60 or 70 points behind him. So even if Max crashes in 2 of the next 4, he won't win the championship, but he's also probably not going to finish any lower than the 3rd, is he?
What would your team have said when you were doing F3 if you'd gone 4 wide into the first corner at, I don't know, Alton Park?
It very much depends on whether it came out successfully or not. And also, Alton Park a little bit more narrow than the entry of the Hermanos Rodriguez circuit. So I probably wouldn't recommend that to anyone.
Yeah, but the 2020 British F3 cars were also a bit smaller.
I wouldn't go 4 wide, but then again, I'm not Max Verstappen, so.
No, I don't think anyone's Max Verstappen. Let's talk about Lewis Hamilton's 10-second penalty then, because Lewis had done really well in qualifying. At one point, he was fastest, eventually started the race on the second row of the grid in 3rd, just behind Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris, of course. And it all looked good, but then he had that little battle with Max Verstappen, which resulted in him getting a 10-second penalty, which we saw in the pit stop must feel like an eternity when you're sat there. And I think they made a good point, actually. I think it was Karun Chandok made a good point on commentary that the stop after a 10-second penalty is often slower, because I guess you have the momentum of the car coming in when you have a normal stop, whereas if the car's sort of stationary, you're kind of like the car's there and you have to sort of not work with the car. Do you know what I mean? The physics of it, Piers. You've got a degree in some scientific thing, right?
I mean, I didn't do a degree in F1 pit stops, that's for certain. But yeah, it is. And also the teams give a few tenths of a second buffer at the end of the stop just to make sure, because if you touch the car before the 10 seconds is up, I can't remember the penalty off the top of my head, but it's pretty hefty. So I think you have to do it again. Basically, you didn't serve it. So yeah, they always give it a little bit. And also, when the car's coming in, the gun, they follow the wheel as it's slowing down. So effectively the gun is on the wheel as the car stops, rather than having to wait until the 10 seconds is up, then doing it, as you say, the lack of momentum as well. So yeah, not ideal for Hamilton, but in my opinion, I'm not sure about the penalty.
Why not? So let's just actually talk about the incident first of all, in case you didn't catch it. It was a little battle with Max Verstappen. Always nice to see Lewis and Max battling it out on track. Reminds me of 2021. And there was a little bit of, I think there's a bit of contact there, but in effect, Max, made a late move, got across the corner and got past Lewis Hamilton. Now, a lot of people I've seen online are hilariously, backing Max Verstappen with the username, like, I don't know, Kevin_1_Verstappen fan 2025. He's very biased when you look at these comments sometimes, but I always find it fascinating with everyone with the 44 in their username backing Lewis Hamilton. But for me, Max Verstappen got to the apex of that corner first, which he's allowed to do. It felt like Lewis left him enough room, but then it was later on that Lewis was obviously trying to regain that position. He went off the track and they deemed that he gained too much of an advantage by coming back on where he came back on. He didn't take the service road. He kind of went across the grass. And obviously then he got the 10-second penalty. Do you agree with the penalty, first of all?
I don't agree with the penalty. Because from my opinion, we're talking about the incident at turn 4 now, because the move up turn 1, I actually thought was pretty good. I quite enjoyed that from Max. He was sent up the inside, bit of contact at the apex. Hey, that's hard racing. I didn't mind that at all. But then Hamilton going around the outside did get ahead as they started turning into the corner. But then Max, knowing the rules, they're head at the apex, just came off the brakes just to make sure he got ahead at the apex. But then I think this is again the flaw in the rules as they're written at the moment. Max didn't stay on the circuit at the exit. He actually went beyond the white line, if I'm not mistaken. Hamilton had no choice but to take to the cut through. Granted, he did go straight through the cut through, didn't take the slip road. But Max at turn 1, for example, along with a couple of other drivers, they took to the escape road or the grass due to a decision they made, came back on ahead, so gained an advantage, then gave back the advantage. So they basically continued on where they left off. So they didn't have a disadvantage. But Lewis Hamilton did the same thing in this instance. He avoided, let's say, because Max didn't stay on the circuit at the exit, he would have had to leave the circuit anyway. He foresaw that coming, decided to avoid contact, went through the grass. But then by the time he came back on and looked in his mirrors, it was 3 wide. So then he would have had to given himself a huge disadvantage. And in my opinion, in this instance, he just avoided gaining an advantage because, he didn't really gain an advantage overall, because I'm sure he gave the time back where he would have slotted in terms of the race. But just because Verstappen chose to go in so deep and run himself wide to stop Hamilton going through and then got in a battle doesn't mean that Hamilton should then have to drop behind those cars as well. So yeah, I think they applied the penalty correctly because, of course, that is the mandate. It's 10 seconds for that situation. But I don't know. I don't like the way that the rules are written in terms of wheel-to-wheel racing at the moment, because I don't think that ahead at the apex do what you want. This is an example. The drivers are going to take it to the limit and push it. And Verstappen went, well, if I'm ahead at the apex, I can kind of do what I want. Doesn't matter if I stay on the circuit. Ultimately, it ended up hindering Max's race anyway, because he ended up getting in a battle with Behrman, got behind Behrman, and that loss cost him a lot of time. And in theory, could have then caught Leclerc far earlier in the race, which would have given him second. So, in my opinion, as much as Max's overtaking and racecraft is exceptional, and he loves those good, big moves, and he's very good at executing them, this is one maybe he would have actually been better off just choosing a slightly cleaner way of doing it, because then he got in the battle with Behrman. So maybe his ego just a little bit getting the better of him.
Well, look, George Russell obviously wasn't very happy as well. I mean, some of the team radio from George Russell will probably be a meme for the rest of eternity, with him having an effing car up his A, which was, I think I could say that, but which was quite funny in parts. And if you saw the interview that they did on the Mercedes social media afterwards, I think he realised maybe that he'd been a little bit brash and that he'd been very vocal on the team radio. But he did say afterwards with Sky Sports F1, I don't understand how 3 drivers can cut the first corner and just continue in the position they entered. It's like allowing you to risk everything and you just have a get out of jail free card if you get it wrong. It's like a lawnmower race. Something needs to change there. That's not really how it should be. So you're kind of on the side of George Russell there with the lawnmower race analogy.
Yeah, I am. I do think the drivers are exploiting the way that things have been done recently, because I don't think you should be able to just try something, cut across the track, come out way ahead, and then drop back in where you were before, especially at the start of the race. Because how many times this year have we seen where there is runoff at the first corner or on the first lap that drivers are exploiting it? They're going, all chips in, all in on one move, thinking, well, if it doesn't pay off, I'll just cut through there and then join back anyway. So it makes it we don't want to see half of the field not use the track on the first few corners, do we? And it is bred out of the fact that we have so much runoff now because of the safety, which is the right thing to do. But I think there should be some sort of something like Monza, the second chicane, or both of the chicanes at Monza. If you leave the circuit at this point, you must go around this bollard or take this specific route so that you are physically unable to gain an advantage, like we saw Max do. We saw, I think Charles did it as well, didn't he, at the first corner, like Hamilton did, so actually there's an argument in the thing we just talked about that Hamilton didn't follow the slip route, so maybe he should have got a 5-second penalty for that, but not for gaining an advantage. So I just don't like the way things are. That's not the way the rules sit at the moment, because I think there's too much opportunity for drivers to exploit loopholes, and that's what they do. That's what they're paid millions of pounds to do. That's what they're sportsmen. They're going to push the rules to their advantage as much as they physically can, and that's what they should do. But I think the rules should just be brought back a little bit to just mean that you have to be a bit more clever about how you go about things.
You've seen actually them the furore about I can't say horror, yeah, about the tape at the start of the race for Lando Norris's grid position, and Red Bull supposedly allegedly trying to take that tape off. I mean, that is, I guess, something that Lando Norris uses to line himself up on the grid because these cars are very low. And if Red Bull have, and I'm not saying they have, but if they've tried to remove that tape, then that is the kind of same mentality in a completely different way of you've got to do whatever it takes and you've got to push every single opportunity. Do you think that maybe the tape thing was blown out of proportion this weekend?
No, I actually don't. I've got pretty strong opinions about that, to be honest. I think that the drivers on circuit, pushing the limits of the rules as they're written is fine. That's fair game. That's what you're supposed to do. And I don't have any problem with Max Verstappen, really. If the rules are get ahead at the apex, try and get to the apex. I don't agree with the rules, but I don't blame Verstappen for doing that, for example. But a team deliberately hindering another car, like pulling the tape off the wall. I've seen a lot of comments that from me are quite uneducated about, Lando needs tape on the wall. Why can't he use the line on the floor? It's very commonplace in motorsport, in touring car racing, in single seaters, even in the iRacing F3, in Formula 3, Formula 2. A lot of drivers use tape on the wall as a reference because you cannot see the ground. There's the box you have to be in. There's the yellow line, which you cannot see from the car. You have to effectively guess where you are when you stop because you have no reference on the ground near you. And quite a lot of the drivers use tape on the wall because you can basically line the tape up with the side of your helmet, and it gives you at least a reference. And it's just very unsportsmanlike from my perspective for Red Bull pulling the tape off the wall. There's one thing battling. Let me take it back a step. If I were racing, I have raced to a fairly high level, and I love motorsport. I love sport. I love the gladiatorial nature of it. I love everyone going out there and trying to beat everyone. But you should, even at the level of Formula One, want to go out there and beat your fellow competitors in a fair game so that you can say, we were the best on that day. We were the best that year. But when you're resorting to unsportsmanlike tactics, I just think it's in bad taste. I think it's not sporting. I don't like it. I don't know. I still don't know the ins and the outs. Maybe no one knows outside of Red Bull Racing whether it was a mechanic acting of his own volition or whether he was under instruction. I've heard rumours that they've done it or tried to do it in numerous other races. I really don't like it, and I agree with the fine. I think it's pretty harsh. Was it €50,000? I think if I saw them.
Yeah, with I think half.
It seems a lot of money for peeling a tape off the wall, but I think it's terrible. I really, really don't like it. To be honest, I think it should have been harsher. I think the person that did it should have got a ban, or there should have been a sanction of some other kind. I think €50,000 is, again, sounds harsh. Of course, it goes in the cost cap, so maybe that is fair. But yeah, I really don't like that sort of thing because we want to see the best team and the best driver get the championship at the end of the year. It didn't make a huge difference because, again, it's only just a minor thing. But if Norris had then overshot his box slightly looking for the tape and couldn't see it, that's then a huge impact in the championship for something that I don't think is in good taste.
I think there's going to be something else that you're going to have a strong opinion on, and that is the Liam Lawson incident where there are two marshals on the track removing a bit of debris in front of him, and it was incredibly close. I mean, how close is too close? Well, I think someone being on the track when there's a car on the track is probably too close, and this was way too close for comfort. And I think as a racing driver, I mean, it's just a no-no, isn't it? Having any heavy machinery or anything like that near a racetrack. We saw what happened with Jules Bianchi, but then having a person on the track is just absolutely unfathomable.
It seems like something that we had solved in Formula One. It was something that you used to see 10, 15 years ago, was marshals scrambling to get something and having, drivers having to dodge them. And motorsport, Formula One moves forward year on year. We're so lucky that we don't see drivers injured in the way that we used to in fairly routine crashes. We don't see deaths very often, which is what we want. We don't want death at all because we want the sport to be thrilling, but not dangerous for the drivers as much as we physically can. One thing that has been removed ever since Jules Bianchi, one of the learnings, was there's no live snatching of cars off the circuit with heavy machinery, JCBs and the like, which has been a real addition that we've seen a couple of times where it's lapsed, and there's been situations where it's happened and the FIA have been pretty strong on it and then made sure it hasn't happened again. Marshals on the circuit when there's cars going around shouldn't really be happening, and it's something we haven't seen, which is great, but it's just, I think, a bit of a miscommunication from the race direction team, because they just forgot. I think they just forgot about Lawson because he pitted early on. Everyone else was in a cluster at the other end of the circuit. They clearly went, right, coast clear, guys, go and retrieve the the debris. And then Lawson comes around the circuit, and it's concerning for me when you hear the team radio, when a driver's genuinely concerned, and you could hear on the team radio that Lawson was like, I almost killed those guys. That was really, really bad. When a driver's that concerned about it, there's something that's really gone wrong there. The FIA will do an investigation. They'll figure out what caused that. They'll figure out why they thought it was clear. They'll put something in place, or I hope they should put something in place to avoid that happening again, because it would only take a marshal to trip in panic, or them to be slightly differently placed where Lawson has no way of getting through them, and something catastrophic. And Lawson, again, shouldn't be put in that position where he potentially could seriously injure, or, even worse with a marshal when he didn't do anything wrong at all. Lawson was just going at the safety, the double wave yellow flag speeds, running his own race. Yes, off the back of the pack because of his instance on the first couple of laps. But, you didn't want to put someone in that position where they are not responsible potentially for injuring someone else.
Yeah, he looked pretty shaken after the race, but there we go. That will get investigated. And that is it for the on-track recap. Looking back at the Mexican Grand Prix, it's going to be a fascinating end to the season. 4 races to go, and Lando Norris leads Oscar Piastri by 1 point.